Welcome back to the second episode of Insanity's Lightbulb. The first entry from my high school journal.
The Rambling Thoughts of Insanity's Lightbulb.
Today, I'll be sharing one of my deepest, darkest secrets that was supposed to be hidden forever. Now, I'm casually reading it out loud to the world, like it's no big deal. I used to think these events would end my life. I can laugh now. Hopefully, you'll be laughing too. And maybe, just maybe, you'll see a little piece of yourself buried somewhere deep in these awkward, cringy, over-caffeinated mess that is my life.
Okay.
I'm your host, Mike Laurier. So grab a joke cola, crank up the old REO Speedwagon, and buckle up. It's episode 2, and we're going back to January 1st, 1980. Back to heartbreak, humiliation, and yes, full frontal nudity.
Portions of this program have been deleted.
Let's get one thing straight right from the start. I never thought I'd make my high school journal public. This thing was meant to be sealed in an airtight vault, buried under 6 feet of old book boxes, surrounded by a moat of moldy clothes, and guarded by a cranky Latin teacher who swore a blood oath never to let it see the light of day. I guess before we get to the 1980s, I guess we need to rewind a few months before the new decade actually kicked in. Back to August 18th, 1979. The opening scene of my high school slow-motion disaster, now available on VHS. I was 14, my dreams filled by marked-down hostess ding-dongs and a deeply misguided sense of destiny. I was on my way to St. Joseph's Catholic Seminary. I was aiming for the top spot. I was going to become Pope. That's right, P-O-P-E, Pope, with no artificial flavors.
That's a no-no.
I honestly felt the Catholic Church needed a spiritual remodel, and I felt I was the man to do it. I figured I should start early, just in case one of my fellow seminarians managed to snag a job in Rome before I did and started climbing that holy corporate ladder. So in the fall of 79, while everyone else was worried about disco dying, I was busy launching my exploratory committee to become a future pope. First thing I needed to do was to come up with some catchy campaign slogans for posters and bumper stickers, because if you're going to run for pope, you better have catchy, clever campaign posters with lines like, "Less incense, more common sense, Pope Mike the First," or "Mike's got the Holy Spirit, but he needs your vote," or "Get holy and vote, Mike for Pope," and one more, "Staying alive with Pope Mike the First." My campaign strategy did not go over well with the piety patrol of the seminary. They were silent, stern, always judging, acting like they had a direct hotline to heaven's HR department. My spiritual advisor accused me of mocking the Catholic Church. I stopped him right there. I explained I wasn't mocking it. I wanted to improve it, reform it, rebrand it, maybe. And the only way in my mind to do that was to become Pope. He just shook his head. I think it's because he knew that my campaign was working, and I was becoming a serious contender. The months started slipping by. My campaign was, at least in my mind, unstoppable. I was ready to become Pope. The world wasn't, but I was. But as a seminarian, yeah, not exactly a holy walk in the park.
Is there anything I can do for you?
Not only was I struggling with my faith, but between the rigorous studies, the daily prayers, as I said in my first podcast, when I was 7 years old, I was diagnosed LD, learning disabled, which meant Classwork in the seminary took twice as long and still only got me half the results. I was running around with my shoes untied, and I usually tripped over my own 2 feet while waiting in line to receive communion. And Latin? Latin was a dead language that felt like it had risen from the grave just to mess with me, personally. And the priest, in their infinite wisdom, made me switch roommates with the anti-seminarian Frank. Yeah, Frank, the guy who used bleach as holy water and blessed me while I slept. Frank, who thought silent meditation was time to plot his next move against me. Frank stood over my bed at 3 a.m. chanting in Latin while holding a plunger like it was the sword of truth. But no matter how bad things got, I did get an emotional glazed donut every Thursday night from 9 to midnight. I'd creep down to the boys' locker room like some kind of music-starved raccoon, willing to risk it all for 3 hours of rock and roll salvation. I would tune my cassette radio player to 105 WXTQ out of Athens, Ohio, to the Boss Groover Show, live from the Groove Yard. He had more gold than Fort Knox and spun everything from 1955 to 1972. My biggest regret? Never being able to join the Slim Whitman fan club that he started. The other bright spot in all this spiritual chaos was when I got a letter from Patsy, a California girl, whose parents were friends with my mom, which in my teenage brain meant destiny. She ended every letter with, "Love, Patsy," and that was all I needed. In my brain, we were not just pen friends, we were basically going steady. A mail order romance with stamps and, for me, a lot of delusions. It all became the perfect storm. Low grades, high spiritual intensity, and a long-distance delusional relationship. Sneaking around after hours, and a very unrealistic ambition to become Pope. And in the middle of the second quarter, I did what any good seminarian would do. I prayed. So I decided to go to the pool, relax, and do some heavy-duty soul-searching. I asked God if he truly wanted me to follow this path I was on. And you know what? God does answer our prayers. But for me, he didn't just let me quietly fade out of the seminary life. Oh no, he gave me a sign so big, so divine, so horrifying and cinematic, I could never return.
Okay!
While I was swimming, I completely lost track of time. And as I casually got out of the pool, toweled off, and went into the locker room, slipped off my swimsuit, and then came a knock at the emergency exit door. I wasn't sure if it was actually a knock, so I ignored it. Then came the second knock, louder, more urgent. Now, I'm standing there like I'm in a bad Edgar Allan Poe rewrite of The Raven. Then came the third knock. So I went over and cracked open the emergency door. Nothing. I walked to the cement stairs and looked around, then to the side of the building. But still, there was nothing. It had to be a joke. Damn that Frank. But by the time I got back, yep, I was locked out. And with every cliche and every low-budget teen comedy, not only was the door shut, locked tight, there was no chance of me getting back in. There was one horrific detail. And that was the fact I was naked. No shirt, no shoes, no towel, no service. I also had no backup plan. It was just me and a whole lot of exposure. With quick thinking, I knew I could jimmy the door open next to the confessionals, sneak into the chapel, then up the back stairway to the dorm rooms, and no one would be the wiser. and everything was going according to plan, right up until I walked into the chapel and found everyone already sitting there for evening prayers, staring at me. So with head held high and hands held low, I went to my dorm room and got dressed. After that, the writing in my journal becomes a mess. Mostly garbled scribbles, half-finished thoughts. But what I could make out is I had a sit-down meeting with my spiritual advisor to discuss the small matter of me bearing my soul to everyone at evening prayers. The next entry was when my mom and Graham showed up at the seminary in our broken down blue 1971 station wagon. I told them I had been running around in the nude in church, and I remember the three of us sitting in the car crying. Not talking, not moving, just crying. And once we finally stopped sobbing long enough to breathe again, we decided it was time for me to leave the seminary. So Mom and Graham and I packed up everything I owned from my dorm room, crammed it carefully into the battered old station wagon, and then made one last stop at the Dean of Discipline's office to inform him that I was leaving. I'm still not sure whether he was relieved or heartbroken, but God made it perfectly clear the priesthood was not for me. The next thing in my journal is dated New Year's Eve, 1979. My family is in our apartment on John Street, huddled together in the living room, listening to Casey Kasem's top 100 songs of the 70s. And just as Don McLean started singing American Pie at number 20, bam! The station hijacked the hits of the 70s for the countdown to ring in the new decade. Because nothing says welcome to the 80s like cutting off a song that you really, really, really like. 10 seconds to 1980. Just enough time for me to reflect on the fact that I had no school plans, I was in a deep depression, and I had the distinct honor of having disgraced my entire family in every Catholic church east of the Mississippi. My name, front page news in every parish bulletin, like a sensational scandal in the National Enquirer. So on January 1st, 1980, I didn't walk, I crawled into the new decade. And let's be honest, the 80s didn't exactly roll out the red carpet for me. More like a giant blinking sign that read, "Enter at your own risk, and for God's sakes, put some clothes on this time." And just as a quick side note, the end of the 1970s left my entire family so emotionally wiped out, we didn't take down our Christmas tree until April 6, 1980. That's Easter Sunday, which means technically baby Jesus met the Easter Bunny, a spiritual crossover event if I do say so myself. So remember, a brand new episode of my video podcast drops every Sunday at 12:01 a.m. all summer long, because nothing says nostalgia like reading old journal entries about spiritual meltdowns, failed romances, and the slow emotional collapse of a family haunted by the leftover visions of their son streaking past the Monsignor. So please, like, subscribe, leave a comment or two. Until next time, you're listening to
The Rambling Thoughts of Insanity's Lightbulb.